Hi, this is Tracy Hales Fast with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico. Today I'm talking to Elizabeth Randolph, writing as E.J. Randolph, about her award-winning story, The Ambassador Calls Twice, a Federation diplomat story. Good morning, Elizabeth.
Good morning.
So you're talking to us from a mountaintop in a small town in southern New Mexico, right?
That is correct. I live outside of Silver City. I'm surrounded on three sides by national forests. Very quiet, no traffic, no hum of people, no one walking on the sidewalk.
Plenty of time to write.
And I'm writing.
But I read The Ambassador Calls Twice, which is really two books in one, and I found them fascinating. Why don't you give the audience a little bit of a synopsis of the whole book?
Space Federation Kate Stevens is given a lengthy vacation by her boss. The conceit is that a lengthy vacation on a resort planet can be arranged by assigning a diplomat to a superfluous position in the local embassy. The vacationer does not have to report to the office even. The catch is the vacationer is officially on the local roster, and the local ambassador can technically call on this person. Kate must break through a communication barrier and convince a group of psychics and meditators to deliver her message to telepathic, mind-sucking aliens, or all humans will be walking around with parasites topping their brain stems.
I really liked Kate. You developed her really believably. She was having a hard time having a vacation, though.
Well, you are supposed to put your main character through hell.
Right, right. That's the story, isn't it?
I suppose it's counterintuitive, but the strength of the story is really based on the strength of the antagonist.
Kate is a crew member of the misappropriation.
The spaceship it is a courier ship, and it's assigned to the diplomatic corps. It is still a Navy ship with a Navy crew, but works out of a special office where they do troubleshooting.
Mm-hmm.
And she was assigned this crew because the boss of that office thought that they would work well together. And like any government, they're trying to save some money, so they said the crew of the spaceship can also be her team. And over the space of several missions, they become very close, and count on each other, and everybody contributes to the mission success.
So were there other books before The Ambassador Calls Twice?
This is the fourth book.
Ah.
Each book stands alone. The different problems. I wanted to explore different social and political as well as military situations and explore various solutions that could be developed.
Well, I like the first book and Kate's problem solving with God's grace people. She really broke the rules, but she was very thinking of their own good.
Lots of history classes just because I enjoyed it.
Uh-huh.
And finally I thought, well, I better take some of the core courses and at least get a BA to show for it. I have many more courses than was required. And when I sat down to write these stories, I was taking my inspiration from the news. So we just had the Iraq War.
Mm.
And natural gas-fired power plants to Iraq, a country renowned for its oil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you see the problem?
Yes, yes.
Brennan fires everybody in the police forces and the military because, for ideological purity. They were part of the party.
Right.
Ba'athist Party. But we already know, like, in Nazi Germany, people had to join the party whether they agreed with it or not for certain jobs. We know in Russia this happened, the whole Soviet Union. And what we did is we hired a whole army of armed men who know how to fight together, who know how to, organize as military units. And everybody was so surprised that overnight there was an insurgency.
Right.
These things were going on, and so I started thinking, we're not, and I've heard from, other stories from in class. I've had some teachers that had, backgrounds in government and other things. So I pick up those, the little anecdotes they might tell in class.
Right.
And I remember them. And so I know that there are a lot of times when we're not listening to what other people want. We're not listening, and we're not paying attention to what their needs are. We don't even ask them. And we're just presuming they want to, live like Americans and want the latest and best.
Right.
And so I wanted a chance to write about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could write nonfiction, but nobody's writing about this kind of thing in fiction.
Right. I
mean, we're looking at, David Drake, some of these other people who do military science fiction.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the rebels are somebody, they're supposed to be crushed, and nobody rebels for no reason. There are reasons. There are things that if a government addresses them, or people address them, we can avoid a lot of conflicts. Not every conflict, obviously, but there are a lot of things that we're not thinking things through, and I thought my way of expressing that could be in fiction.
Sometimes you can tell the truth in fiction.
Right.
Yes.
Or get people to really think about it, or just get an attitude of look for alternatives. I mean, I didn't want to... My mother's 91, and she reads all my books. She's one of my biggest supporters. On the one hand, that's wonderful. And on the other hand, I have no profanity in my books. I have no sex.
Uh-huh.
There are some things that I must follow. And she was so afraid if I'd write some things about current countries. And so I said, science fiction, I can make up planets, make up society, and still show the same principle in action.
It's great the way you've done that. And in the second book...
Yeah, it's fun.
Yes, I bet. In the second book, which is contained within this, I love the Buddhist planet.
Oh, I do too.
That's great. That's great. Kate had a little bit of a difficulty figuring out how to communicate with them, but then she did. She did well.
She did it, and she had to consider their history,
right.
Take them seriously,
right,
understand them, and follow what how they view the world, how they communicate, and their imperatives.
Yes.
And that cross-cultural communication is a big...
And what a better way to show that than in an interplanetary setting. And I love the way, I'm not going to give anything away, but I love the way that in the second book it was resolved. It was very clever.
That one took me a while.
That was great. Now would be a really good time to read a little bit out of the book for us.
Okay. Well, this is out of the book one out of The Ambassador Calls Twice.
Mm-hmm.
This is when she's just arrived and make a courtesy call to the ambassador and finds out that she's going to be called in.
Right.
We're in a little bit of a jam, but of course. The second protocol officer has a group that decided to stay 3 extra days, so there was no one to handle the most recently arrived delegation. I stared at him in disbelief. Handle a delegation all by myself for 3 days here? But I'm totally ignorant of the local emporium. No problem. All they need is a Federation representative to sign their contracts, because they are one of our development clients. They've been here before, and they know where they need to go. I breathed a sigh of relief. I wouldn't be asked to do something I didn't know how to do. And, more importantly, I wouldn't be responsible for wining and dining the group. I can handle that. He clasped his hands in front of him and his face took on a serious expression. Their planet was settled by a generation ship. I understood. Their colony was settled by people who started out a couple hundred years before faster-than-light ships were developed. On old Earth, they were a minority religious community persecuted by the adherents of the dominant religion of the region. Old Earth's government donated a large generation ship, and most of the survivors left on the ship. When they made it to their planet, they named it God's Grace. He snorted. They should have named it God's Wrath. Why? Disease. Disease killed so many, their society should have dissolved into chaos, but their religion saved them. He shook his head. I'm not a religious man, mind you, but I gotta admit their religion was a positive force. But these people are primitive. You can't lose so many people and so many skills and keep much functioning. They were rediscovered 10 years ago, and the society was at the subsistence agricultural level. I gasped. He straightened and folded his hands as if in prayer. We're upgrading their technological level at a gradual pace under strict supervision. A designated person in the Ministry of Technology decides what they can have. Every level of technology is integrated before another is introduced. That's so much better than throwing everything at them at once. We now know the pitfalls accompanying forced draft modernization. It causes societal dislocation and sometimes a backlash accompanied by violence. I congratulated myself on remembering that last bit, word for word, from one of my diplomacy classes. He nodded and looked at me like another soulmate in the cause of uplifting the human race. It will only be for 3 days. Then the second officer will relieve you. You can start immediately. That little group you saw leaving my office as you arrived is the one. They're waiting in the outer office. Okay, so now we skip over to where she finds out the reality. And Hoke and Mellock and Blue Bar, those are the development clients. Hoke smiled. We've been coming to Bellasport for 10 years, so we've found a few places we like. He laid his fork down and his lips tightened. Every time we come, it is to buy whatever Central chooses this time for us to have. I frowned. Doesn't anyone ask you what you need? No. His sharp reply cracked in the air. They tell us what we want. His eyes darkened and a raw honesty filled his voice. I cocked my head to the side. From your perspective, how is your technological development progressing? He stiffened. Every 12 standard months, a Federation team visits God's Grace. He spoke with exaggerated precision. They go over how well we use the latest equipment they've allowed us to purchase. Mellock moaned. Oh, Hulk. He threw his napkin down. It's patronizing. They treat us like we're idiots. I drew back. What happened to the scientific program of experts extending a helping hand to these backward people? Do you object to how the Federation is guiding your development? Guiding. Mellock touched his arm. Be careful. They're paying for our purchases. He grimaced. But that's it. They pay, so we accept their patronizing limits on what we can buy. Hulk, please. No more. I'm tired of the lies. I leaned forward. Tell me more. He searched my face. Are you really interested? Yes. We would like to buy generators, but because we don't have oil or gas, we've been denied them. Oh, that's reasonable. You certainly couldn't afford to import fuel. That's not the point. They've given us wind and solar, and that's great most of the year. But we have a 2-month rainy season when we go without power. We shut down. I sucked my breath in. I agree, that's a problem. He drew back. You agree? Sure. I'll sign for whatever you need. I doubt you'll get a chance. What they decide to give us is what we get. By the way, how do you know you lack oil and gas? We do have hydrocarbons, also rare earths, non-ferrous metals, and uranium. The Federation did a survey, but said we weren't ready to exploit our resources. Lugar bent his head towards Lucar, his hand cupped over his mouth. maybe we need to look beyond the Federation. I stiffened and stared into the distance. I can get access to that report, and if I couldn't, Nick could. Hope flicked his hand. So what? I have contacts on Gorak, the big mining planet. I leaned back. Maybe a joint venture. Circumvent the Federation bureaucracy. And at the same time, keep these people in the Federation. Hope's mouth dropped open. You would help us? Yes, there's nothing like a faceless, meddling bureaucrat to get my blood up. I don't need assistance. The crew of my ship. I'll have to ask.
I love that scene. Well, she's going like, nobody asked us what we need. They just told us what we want.
Right.
Yes, and she and her crew members helped them solve that problem. They did do. She had a boyfriend, and they did some amusement park activities. That was really clever.
Yeah, that was fun to think about.
Very
See,
good.
this is what I like. I think this is so much fun. For me, starting to write, I can point at the date and say, this is when I started to write stories. So it was January 1st, 2009. I sat down to write, and then it was like everything clicked for me. Out of everything I've tried to do, this was everything, and I try to analyze why is that, and I think it's because I can communicate my values. I can communicate things I've learned, say other classes in history.
Mm-hmm.
I can have my philosophical meanderings. I can have my imagination going. It's all tied up in one package. It's just, the process itself is so much fun. So I'm getting internal rewards, and external rewards are not nearly as important, like competition or
Right.
Secondary type things. It's the actual process of writing. It's just so much fun every day.
Good.
Yeah, I'm not really sure how you actually can break it down. I think I have an analytical aspect to my mind, and I'm trying to figure out, so how can I actually break this down and say exactly what contributes? But you just said creativity. I mean, how can you really dissect creativity?
Exactly, right. And everyone's different. I talk to a lot of authors, and each one has his or her own way.
I'm sorry I took so long to find it, but I guess that's proof that anybody at any stage of their life can find something that
Absolutely.
really works for them.
So were you always interested in science fiction as far as reading science fiction?
As a kid, I read everything.
Mm-hmm.
I read every book in the library.
Right.
In grade school, the school librarian noticed I'd read everything 3 times in their little school library. She walked me down to a public library, signed the permission,
Oh,
I think I'm like in 4th grade, for me to take out adult books, and I just read everything in that library.
oh,
And I read and read. It was wonderful. I mean, they let me go whenever I wanted to go. But then when I became an adult, I lost my vision, or most of it. But one of the things of moving out here is clear air has cleared up my vision, as well as some other things, I mean. But this
Right.
finished it. So it was like I can read and write. It allowed me to actually embark on a writing, I wouldn't say career, I hate to say that,
well,
but to follow this passion. That follows better. So I read everything. I mean, I like science fiction, I like thrillers, I like romance, I like every kind of story. And I read nonfiction. I read history.
right.
I just read Katie Tired. She wrote a book called Unbelievable about being on the campaign trail for the 2016 Trump campaign. That was interesting.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I think you have to read a variety to keep new ideas coming.
I do too. But one thing about science fiction, you have to build worlds as well as story. So which came first with Kate's story? The technical aspects or the planetary aspects, or her?
The problems. And I told you, a lot of it is inspired by something on the news. Like piracy is in this book too, but it's nothing like the piracy that was occurring at the time. Northeastern side of Africa, there were some problems with piracy for a while, and
Right.
cargo ships. And Or Pirates is about another planet that's stealing ore shipments, so we have interplanetary problems. So I take something, and then I sit down, and I go, I'd like to write something. How does that happen? It just spills out pretty fast. And I don't know, maybe it all comes out pretty much together.
That's interesting.
I don't even write chapters. I just write it all the way through. And my mom said, people want chapters. And then I've been reading up on, you want to know how far they are.
Right.
And then I've been reading that it's good to put hooks, at the end of chapters. And so I may actually change my method. And
what you're doing now works really well. And I like the artwork in there also. That's your artwork, correct?
yes, that's true. It's the first thing I was trying for, because that was more my dream. I've never dreamed of being an author, other than I thought about writing nonfiction.
Uh-huh.
But I never, ever thought about writing fiction. I wanted to be an artist.
Oh, okay.
And I'm surrounded by by landscapes and flowers and other things that I was painting. But there, and I hit an inner wall with that.
Uh-huh.
Hit an inner wall with music, and there's no inner wall with writing stories.
Each one of those arts, I think, informs the other one.
That's possible.
Mm-hmm.
I do like putting in the drawings. I like doing my own covers.
Yeah.
I think if I'm an artist, why not?
Right.
Why not do it? Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So what's next? What's the next tale? Will we see Kate and her crew again?
Well, I wrote out 9 handwritten stories.
Oh my!
As before I had a computer. And then I started putting them on. I also had to learn how to write fiction as opposed to nonfiction.
Right.
Most people think it's just writing, but there's a world of difference between how you have to write them. And at first I was writing these in a very nonfiction way, where I would frame a scene, say, okay, they continue their discussion at dinner. Then I'd have the discussion at dinner, and then I would tell you what it meant, which is, that's how you would do nonfiction.
Right. Right.
Tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and you tell them what you told them.
Exactly.
And I started reading books and articles and realizing there's some big differences between the two modes of writing. So it took me a while on the first few, because I'd read something new and go, oh my, and go running back and read portions or whole things. What are filter words? And, you shouldn't be saying that. You don't frame things. If you have to explain it, it's art. Writing stories, it's art. If you have to explain it, you have failed. So that was that. I am fascinated by the differences between those two ways of writing. And so what am I doing now? Get back to your question.
Uh-huh.
I decided that I really should do some, not necessarily friendly aliens, but for aliens that humans can form a relationship with.
Oh, cool.
And that is what I'm in the middle of finishing that one. Yes. So this one's fun. If you've probably heard of committees of reconciliation they were doing, say, in Rwanda after the genocide. They've done it in Canada. Well, I'm having the aliens actually do that.
Oh.
That is their mode of operation. And at first, Kate cannot get along with these people because they do everything by consensus. They do everything by what they've done in the past. And you can't be an independent. She's used to being independent, making decisions, that kind of person. And here she is trying to deal with people where the group matters far more than an individual. So I'm having a little bit of fun with that. But she ends up respecting their way of things. She had to learn to respect them, see them as admirable, courage in the face of some pretty bad situations that develop. But I can't. No spoilers.
No spoilers. Are these only electronic? Your stories, your books?
No, I have. They're e-books and they're paperback.
Okay. And I know your website is Randolph, RANDOLPH web.wordpress.com.
.wordpress.
Great.
Right now the books are available on Amazon. There is an author page which will have all the books listed. And then you can see all the other books that that preceded it, and right now I have No Charity is a book that follows.
Your website
That's
is
true.
a good source to find information anyway.
That is true. And I do believe I have links on the website that will get you to Amazon.
Right.
But it does have the books and has descriptions.
And I very much enjoyed reading the book and talking to you about it.
I could go into more detail on various things, but I think we covered quite a bit of nice, good, juicy stuff.
I do too.
Fun stuff.
I do too.
Things that matter. This is one of the things I like to do. I told you, I think all authors put in their values.
I do too.
And if you read carefully, you can learn a lot about what an author really values,
Yes.
what they think about.
Yes.
And you can learn about pop culture too,
Right.
for an era. Look at and I've just been thrilled at the idea that I like to communicate, and I've been thrilled at the idea of communicating all my different understandings and values. This is just, I think writing fiction has just been the most fun thing I've ever come up with.
Well, you write well, so evidently I think you found your niche.
Well, I didn't at first, and I think if you find something that resonates, that is written on your soul, and you enjoy doing it, you're just going to get better because you just like spending time doing it.
Exactly.
And I worked hard for, at it, and I continue to work and improve. I have a writing buddy. You interviewed her, Kate Rauner. She helps with giving me feedback. And recently, I've been able to create a writing group in town.
Oh, good.
And I am so happy with it.
That's great. Yeah.
It's wonderful.
And that was Elizabeth Randolph, writing as E.J. Randolph, about her book, The Ambassador Calls Twice, a Federation Diplomat's Story. This is Tracy Hales Vass with Right on Four Corners on KSJE 90.9 FM in Farmington, New Mexico.